So from here on out, I'm going to start including commercial in this. So let's start. Why commercial property investment in 2020? Well, there's a lot of horror stories going around. I've seen it. I read the news. I look at the problems that commercial tenants are having, where retailers aren't experiencing the profit that they used to. There's difficulties with the chain restaurants who keep shutting down. There's wobbles around these retailers who have got multiple units. I mean, it's not really a good picture of what commercial property investment is, because the first thing that you think is, well, if I was to buy commercial property, my tenants would go bust and then I wouldn't have an income. I get it. But here is the other thing. When we talk about commercial property, we are not just talking about retail, A1 retail with a standard shop in it. We are talking about cafes. We are talking about takeaways. We're talking about estate agencies, banks, betting shops, you name it. All of these different types, offices, industrial, leisure. We have got so many different options on the table, and I now want to get you thinking differently about how commercial property investment works. So firstly, if you're interested in commercial property investment, what you need to be looking for is a commercial property with opportunity. I'll say that again, a commercial property with opportunity. And when I say opportunity, I mean a commercial property where you can put a new tenant in who's going to be a better quality tenant, and a better quality tenant is called a stronger covenant tenant. Or maybe you can increase the rents, or maybe you simply look at it and you think, I could change the tenant mix around in this to make it so that my tenants perform better. And that is what you're looking for when you're buying commercial property investment, because the value from commercial property, and this is global, the value from commercial property comes from your rental income stream. So how much the rent is, obviously the more rent you've got coming in, the higher the value, but that's caveated by the fact that you have to also show that you can have that rental income coming in for a long period of time. So, if you've got £25,000 coming in just for 2 years, as opposed to £20,000 coming in for the next 20 years, well, what's a more valuable property? Well, the one where you've got income coming in for 20 years because that's guaranteed. The 25,000 for 2 years, well, what's going to happen after year 2 if the tenant is moving out? So you want to be maximizing the rental income, but also prolonging the length that you're going to get that rental income for. And you need to make sure that you have got a tenant in place that is going to be able to pay the rent for that term. Those are the 3 things that you need to be making sure with any commercial unit, because that's where the value of the property is going to come from. Now, you may then say, Natasha, well, I don't have any control over whether that tenant's going to pay rent or not. Wrong! That's a completely wrong mindset. What you need to think about, and this is entirely you as a landlord or your property manager, is you have to think about tenant mix strategy. And tenant mix strategy, and if you're a student of mine and you've been listening, you will know how much I bang on about tenant mix strategy and how it's your duty as a property manager or a surveyor to figure out the tenant mix strategy. In order for you to ensure that a tenant is going to stay in place and they're going to keep paying the rent, you need to make sure that you are letting the unit to the right tenant. That is the secret sauce here. And so how are you going to make sure that you're going to do that? Well, firstly, if you're making the decisions as a landlord, you need to have a real interest in the local area. So you need to get out on foot, wander up and down the street and figure out what tenants are thriving and what tenants just aren't working well. And you can do this for any of your retail units, or you can do this for your office space. You need to have a look at what is that area suited to tenant-wise? And has there been any change over the last couple of years? What's the cycle in this area? Has it been that 5 years a certain type of tenant has really flourished, and then 5 years it's all changed, in which case might give you a little bit of an indication of how long you need the lease to be, or when you need to have a break clause. You also need to have a look at how many of a certain type of tenant are in an area. And this is not a good or bad thing. So, for example, where you have got a design quarter, you have lots of different tenants of really the same type. So they're showrooms. So they would have carpets or rugs or antiques or paint shops or furniture shops, bed shops, light shops, anything that you can put in your home or in your garden for the interior design. And that's where you're creating kind of a design hub. Now, if you've got a design hub in a certain location and you're going to only be attracting that sort of tenant, you know that people are going to come to that area specifically for that. Now, you don't want to have too many of the same type of tenants together, because when you've got huge amounts of increased competition, all tenants struggle. But if you have a little bit of healthy competition, for example, you have 2 furniture stores close together, but you have one high end and one lower end, you start to give customers options, in which case they will definitely come to your area, because they can get everything they need and look at everything that they want just by simply going to the destination. So that's one way of thinking about tenant mix. Could you group all sorts of tenants together so that they get their customers to that area for that specific reason?